Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, Sword and Shield is a weapon that first sunk its hooks into me when I played Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate with all the funky hunter arts and styles, and yes, oils, which I deeply miss for Sword and Shield. But it wasn't until the Iceborne expansion when Perfect Rush was added that I felt like the weapon was truly starting to develop more of its own proper personal identity, at least, without the oils. And this continued into Rise and Sunbreak, and then of course even further now into Monster Hunter Wilds itself, with a very important new proper attack in Charged Chop, with some funky bits to how it actually works, and it is a perfect addition to the Sword and Shield moveset because of how it functions, which is essentially as an extra bonus combo finisher with high damage potential. In the beta, this attack was way too overtuned for the non-finisher combo, and a lot of people just played it by spamming the new attack sort of over and over again, but I'm happy to tell you that not only is that not the best combo in the full game release, but even with that said, Charged Chop itself is still not only usable, but genuinely good to use too, so they nerfed it, but not too much. All that said, today it's time to go in full depth on the Sword and Shield as a weapon, one of my personal main weapons, especially with my time in Wild so far, starting with the basics and then every move and the options you have in each scenario. Then we'll dive a bit deeper into how you would apply these combos to a monster in action. We'll go over the focus strike and anything important related to focus mode for Sword and Shield, and then I've got a really chunky spreadsheet table filled out for us to talk about the actual best combos for the weapons in Wilds, with all damage numbers laid out and stuff like that. Then we'll just talk a bit about build philosophy for Sword and Shield for how to actually build around it too, to cap it all off. Starting off then, let's go down to the very basics of Sword and Shield, and before we even get to the attacks, what is Sword and Shield's role among the Monster Hunter weapons? What should your focus be while using it? Well, Sword and Shield is probably the most adaptable weapon in the entire roster. You can swap between sharp and blunt damage at will, depending on which combos you use. You can do great elemental damage, you've got great status build-up potential, you have fast combos, you have slow combos that do more damage but require more time to execute. You've got high movement combos, you've got low movement combos, you've got aerial combos to attack monsters in the sky, and then there's the whole other half of the weapon, which is the shield, and this is exceptional at guarding in Wilds, especially with the perfect guard mechanic. This happens when you press guard right before getting hit by an attack, letting you launch off a counter attack that is in itself one of our strongest moves called Counter Slash, but there are extra tricks to this too that we'll be talking about later as well. All this to say, Sword and Shield doesn't have one set singular role. You can do a bit of everything, and you can do it extremely well too. Now, as we start to take our weapon out, before we attack, two big things to talk about here. The first being that you never need to sheathe on Sword and Shield while fighting a monster actively. If the monster changes zones or maybe runs like 20-30 meters away, sure, yeah, sheathe, run over, maybe get on your mount. But if a monster is just moving around you doing its regular moveset, you have impeccable unsheathed movement. Sliding Swipe is your guard plus triangle attack, and this covers massive distance and also has a very large amount of iframes on it. So if a monster moves away from you a short distance, just spam Sliding Swipe until you get back in range. As well, the other reason you don't just have to sheathe with the weapon is that Sword and Shield uniquely can use consumables and items in general while unsheathed. If you press the use item button while guarding, you can use anything in your item bar that you have selected, or if you have an item on your radial wheel instead, you can just use the radial wheel input without needing to guard first even, which makes it super easy to use the new optimal health or optimal status recovery options in here too. So you just basically rarely ever need to sheathe in combat, and if you do sheathe, it often costs you either time or damage that you could have otherwise snuck in there. So a good mindset while playing this weapon is to try to avoid sheathing as much as possible, and through doing that, you'll end up learning the exceptions to that rule too, and work out when you should maybe sheathe instead. With that covered, let's go over your basic attacks. Sword and Shield is an extremely malleable weapon, and some of the tools it has are worth discussing before the properly basic combos as a result. First, Sword and Shield can enter almost any of its combos at any time. If you are doing the triangle combo, you can, after any attack, start the circle combo without any punishment, or you could even change it into the shield bash combo. The other main important note early here is that after pretty much any attack, you can press triangle and circle for round slash. This turns your character in the direction that your left stick is pointed, or hold triangle and circle for charged chop. You cannot round slash after a charged chop, but you can charged chop after a round slash. If you use round slash at the end of a combo, it instead turns into Spinning Reaper, a much more powerful version of the same attack, and the same applies to Charged Chop. If used at the end of a combo, it will do significantly more damage than if you used it to end a combo early. As with Round Slash, you cannot use Spinning Reaper after Charged Chop, but you can use Charged Chop after Spinning Reaper, so a full-length combo would be any of your standard standard combos followed by spinning reaper to extend for bonus damage, and then charged chop, and then rising slash to finish it off. But we'll talk about that in a minute. It's important to talk about all of this stuff first because it will help you understand how sword and shield combos are put together. While Sheathe, then, if you are moving and press triangle, you will do advancing slash. Then you will enter your neutral position. From your neutral position, you can press triangle and circle to do advancing slash as well while unsheathed, but you cannot do this following advanced slash itself, of course. From your standing neutral position, triangle will perform chop for a slice in front of you. A second triangle will do side slash, a slightly weaker slice. A third triangle input in a row will do diagonal rising slash for a larger hit, and then the fourth triangle in a row is diagonal chop, which is the natural end of this first combo. I'll be referring to this from here on as the chop combo. Aside from this first input, if you are pushing your left stick in a direction when you are doing any of the rest of the chop combo, you will also move a couple of steps in that direction with each input. That makes this combo excellent against a mobile monster, great for a monster that is moving while not necessarily directly attacking you. After the fourth hit of the chop combo, you can either use spinning reaper or charge chop finisher, the more powerful version of charge chop, or again, you can do spinning reaper followed by charge chop if you would like to as well. Pressing circle while in your standing neutral position will perform lateral slash. Then a second circle input will do return stroke. A third circle input will give you spinning rising slash, the end hit of the lateral slash combo, which is how I'll be referring to it from here on too. Unlike the chop combo, the lateral slash combo is stationary, there is no movement involved, but the combo itself is faster than the chop combo, as well as being higher damage as well. The third hit of the lateral slash combo can once again be followed by spinning reaper, charge chop finisher, or the combination of the two. If you are moving, if you are pressing your left stick and you press circle, you will instead do shield attack. This hits with your shield instead of your sword. Press circle again after this for shield bash, and then a third circle input for hard bash, which ends the combo, which I'll be referring to as the shield bash combo from this point forwards. As this is the end of the shield bash combo, you can then use spinning reaper, charge chop, or both once again. You cannot enter the chop combo or lateral slash combo after the first shield bash attack, so once you start this combo, you either need to finish it or break it off early through other means. You can do that by rolling, using round slash, which will allow you to rotate as well, or you can use charge chop to break the combo, but it's not great for that as it actually takes longer for that animation than the remaining shield hits would take anyways. Other things of note is that all three hits of the shield bash combo are of course done with your shield, and that isn't actually just a flavor thing either, it has an actual effect. All shield attacks deal blunt damage instead of your normal slashing damage with the sword, which means different monster parts are differently weak to your sword hits than they are to your shield hits. But also that means that shield hits to a monster's head will apply stun value, and you can genuinely get multiple stuns in a hunt just with sword and shield if you are trying to. Aside from that, shield hits also do not consume any weapon sharpness, which is neat, but they don't apply any element or status buildup either. Aside from that, sword and shield also of course has a blocking function. Hold right trigger to guard against incoming attacks. Press the button while your weapon is sheathed to draw directly into your guard stance as well. If you press the guard button directly before an attack would otherwise hit you, this counts as a perfect guard. Perfect guard negates all damage you would have taken, reduces the stamina cost of blocking, and sword and shield has an attack called counter slash that can only be done by pressing triangle after a perfect guard. This will put you back into standing neutral position, but it is just one of our strongest attacks as well, and it can be followed by regular round slash or the weaker version of charge chop as it doesn't count as a combo finisher. While guarding, you can press triangle for sliding swipe. This does okay damage, but the main point of it is that you get a ton of iframes. Like, no exaggeration, this is the largest amount of iframes on any attack in the game. It is longer than a dodge roll by a good margin, and it starts when you press the input and lasts until you stop the slide part of the animation. So you can dodge attacks with this quite easily, while also still outputting damage as well because it still hits with the weapon while you're moving. As well, this has a lot of use for movement and repositioning in general, even outside of the iframes, as it slides you a very solid distance on each use. Another option while holding guard then is to press circle for guard slash. This is one of your lowest damage hits, but not only are you guarding while you hit with it, so it's free, safe damage, but very importantly in Wilds, this has a second important function just like it did in Rise, where directly after guard slash, if an attack hits you, it will count as a perfect block. So Sword and Shield actually has two separate perfect guard windows. The first is just guarding at the right time, but then if you are already holding the guard button, then using guard slash when an attack is about to hit you will also perfect guard. Because of this, you essentially get two chances at perfect guarding every attack if you want them. If you press guard a little bit early, you can still hit guard slash afterwards to get your perfect guard, which you can then follow into that very powerful counter slash attack. Your next option while holding guard is to press triangle and circle at the same time for rising slash, which is just a nice quick hit that starts other combos. And this is when we now get to talk about rising slash as a whole. This attack actually comes up at multiple points in multiple different combos. Most notably, if you press triangle after any aerial attack, you will do rising slash. This resets you back to standing neutral position, and most often it does so faster than if you didn't press any button at all at the end of those attacks. This most applies to charged chop, where if you hit rising slash after any use of charged chop, you get back to your neutral position faster than if you just used charged chop and then didn't press any button at all. The same applies to your other aerial attacks too, which we will talk about in a moment, because next it's time to talk about the back hop. After pretty much any attack or at any time while you are guarding, if you hold your left stick directionally back from the way your character is facing and press circle, you will do a backstep. What I mean with those words is that you're not just holding back on the left stick towards you, because the input does not respect the camera, it depends on your character's rotation. Unless you do a backstep from focus mode. So if you use focus mode, it will line up your character with your camera automatically. So if you're struggling to keep track of your character's rotation for backstep, just cheat it a bit by using focus mode so it's always aiming directly towards you. Back to the attack itself then, backstep has iframes. So if you time it with when a monster is about to hit you, you will avoid the damage. If you backstep and then use no other inputs, this will jump forwards for a weak advancing slash, then back to neutral position. If you hold back on the left stick after doing the backstep and press nothing else, you will do a rising slash. And this one is a very important one to note that some people who I know have a lot of time on Sword and Shield don't even know about, because this lets you use backstep as a back eject and a proper evade. If you hold it back and do the rising slash, you don't jump forward again, whereas every other way of using backstep will then throw you back forward towards the monster afterwards. If you hold down circle while doing a backstep, after a moment you will flash and the attack will be charged. You can hold this down longer to delay when you actually release it, but it won't change the damage done. Once you flash, it is what it is. When you release the input, after the flash happens, you will do charged slash, a forward leaping attack. If charged slash hits a monster, it will follow into scaling slash, which throws you up into the air while hitting the monster multiple times. The number of hits that scaling slash does essentially depends on how large the monster is, as it will follow your blade as you travel upwards, meaning that it is stronger against bigger monsters. Once you are in the air from scaling slash, you have four main options. Triangle will do jumping slash. This is your lowest damage aerial option, but has really high mount damage buildup. This is a hidden stat that you can't see in the game, but basically this means if you want to mount a monster specifically, use jumping slash. That is the main reason you would ever use that attack, and there's not really another one. The next option while mid-air is to press circle for falling bash. This will aim your shield down, hit the monster with it when it first connects with them, and then do an extra pop of damage when you hit the ground as well, and this is your most consistent method of damage from an aerial position, but it uses shield attacks, which means blunt damage, stun value to the head, no sharpness consumption, but no element damage and no status buildup. The third option you have while aerial is to press both triangle and circle together for plunging thrust. This turns your sword upside down and pierces the whole way down through the monster. The number of hits that this does, again, entirely depends on how much monster there is along its path. Against big, chunky, especially tall monsters, this is actually extremely strong, but it goes down in value a ton against smaller monsters or when monsters are moving as well. This attack uses less sharpness than an average hit does to make up for how many hits it does that quickly, so it doesn't quite gobble up sharpness as much as you might think it does, and this is your aerial option that is best for doing element damage and applying status buildup too. That said, this can also be good for pure raw attack Sword and Shield builds, but we'll talk about that more when comparing combo damage numbers a bit later on. Your fourth option then is to use your focus strike mid-air, which we'll cover in its own section. And then of course you technically have another fifth option, which is just use no inputs after going to the air and fall back slowly to the ground afterwards. Speaking of the ground then, we actually aren't yet done with the backstep. After pressing backstep, if you press triangle, you will initiate leaping slash, and this is the start of the perfect rush combo. Leaping slash itself has a variable jump distance. With no left stick input at all, it will barely move you forwards, whereas if you are holding it forwards, or if you're holding the stick any other direction, it will do a pretty hefty leap to actually start off the combo. After leaping slash, your character will enter a new stance and flash red. Your controller will vibrate vibrate when this flash happens as well if you're using a controller, and if you press triangle, you will follow up with Perfect Rush 1. You can do this before the flash happens, but every hit of the attacks that are called Perfect Rush do significantly increase damage if you time your inputs with the flash or vibration. To be specific, it does 2.5 times more damage on every single hit when you time it right compared to if you don't. So essentially, it's not worth doing Perfect Rush at all to begin with unless you are at least trying to hit the timing right on the inputs. Practice is practice, of course, and sometimes you'll be off rhythm while trying to, but at least go out of your way to attempt to hit the timing window whenever you do use Perfect Rush, and your damage will go up in no time at all. As part of Perfect Rush 1, you will hit 3 times, 1 shield attack and 2 blade attacks. Then you'll enter a ready position before flashing red once again, which will also vibrate your controller. Press triangle here for Perfect Rush 2, which is a singular shield attack. You will then enter another ready position and flash red once again and vibrate. Press triangle and you'll perform a much beefier version of Scaling Slash, the multi-hit attack which sends you into the aerial position. Once you're in the air, you have the same options as with Backstep into Scaling Slash, no differences. Other options worth noting then is that during Perfect Rush, you can cancel out into Spinning Reaper instead of doing the Scaling Slash as the finisher if you don't want to go aerial within that moment, and you can also then follow up that Spinning Reaper with a Charge Chop finisher, as it does count as a finished combo. Then you can use Rising Slash to return immediately to neutral position. You can also roll out of any hit of Perfect Rush, or you can press the guard button after any of the hits to start guarding instead of continuing the combo as well. If you jump off of a ledge by rolling off of a ledge with your weapon unsheathed, you can press triangle or circle for jumping slash, or you can press triangle and circle at the same time for plunging thrust. This is most useful against super big monsters if you're coming at them from above for whatever reason. You can also access these moves by doing advancing slash to move off of a ledge, or using sliding swipe to go off of a ledge as well. Similarly, if you do advancing slash or sliding swipe towards any wall, you will run up a few feet up the wall, then launch yourself off of it and automatically do plunging thrust, which is actually pretty cool for if you can fight a monster in like a tight corridor with walls. If you are sliding down a slope and press triangle, you will do jumping advanced slash. This can follow into jumping slash or triangle and circle together for plunging thrust. Now let's talk about focus mode for Sword and Shield and its focus strike as well. Focus mode is really strong for this weapon, and I recommend trying to play with focus mode active pretty much as often as possible, so you could even set it to toggle in the settings so you don't have to hold focus mode active all the time. There are a few big reasons for this. First is that focus mode makes your character face the direction that your camera is looking. This makes it easier to hit and aim your attacks in general, and most often this will extend the turn radius on your attacks too in between hits. This lets you rotate more than you would be able to do between your attacks if you did not use focus mode. As well, while guarding with focus mode active, because your character will automatically face the same direction as the camera, this gives you very precise control over the direction that you will be guarding, because you can only guard attacks from the front. This makes it much easier to guard than it would be without using focus mode, and easier to get those perfect guards and counter slashes as a result of that. Third, Backstep. As mentioned earlier, because your character and camera are aligned in focus mode, the input for Backstep is simply back on the left stick and circle consistently. There's no extra complications, no extra thought, but that's not all either for Backstep here, because when you are in focus mode, you can backstep from a neutral standing position. Normally you would have to attack once first, or you'd have to guard first, but position. Without focus mode, you need to either attack or guard before you can backstep, but while in focus mode, just pressing back on the left stick and circle will instantly initiate backstep, letting you combo that however you want to, and it actually skips a step in the process for our generally strongest combos too, especially against downed monsters. With that then, let's talk about the focus strike itself. Use this by pressing R1, your right bumper, while in focus mode. You can do this on the ground, or you can do this in the air, including after scaling slash if you want to as well. The only time that you can't do this really is after doing a focus strike itself. This does a low damage thrust in itself, but if you connect that thrust with a wounded part on a monster, you'll do some damage and then climb up on top of them. You will have iframes until you jump off, which is very useful in the first place, and then from here, you can either press triangle to do falling slash, which is a strong hit to start, and then a plunging thrust type multi-hit that depends on the length of the monster while you descend from the position of the wound itself. Or instead, you can press circle for upswing bash. This will hit with your shield multiple times and put you into the aerial position, which you can then follow with your standard jumping slash, falling bash, or plunging thrust options. If you hit the wound and latch on, but then don't press any buttons, you will eventually just do a falling slash by default. As for which of these choices is best to take advantage of a wound, honestly it's pretty situational. Falling slash is consistent every time that you use it, but if a monster is stationary enough for you to actually do an aerial follow-up, that is almost always going to result in more overall damage. So if a monster is actively moving around, being evasive, just use falling slash. It's probably best just to get that damage out. Otherwise, upswing bash is likely better, and then you have your regular aerial options to follow that too. One final but very important note about the Focus Strike 2 is that Sword and Shield has a very unique interaction with the wound mechanic. Our Focus Strike doesn't just pop wounds, it can also create wounds. Specifically, as a monster is close to having a wound opened, you'll see the body part look slightly scarred, maybe a little bit white, and if you use the Focus Strike on the body part while it looks like this, you will get a multi-hit bonus stab attack as part of your wound that you wouldn't normally get from just using this normally, and you will rip your weapon out of them for a decent chunk of bonus damage, which will also open up the wound earlier than normal. Essentially, if you get good at realizing when a monster part is close to becoming wounded, you can use this to not only get extra damage from the interaction itself, but also create more wounds over a hunt than the other weapons would. This is especially useful in multiplayer hunts too, as there are plenty of weapons that get significant boosts from their Focus Strike mechanics, and Sword and Shield can enable these other weapons by opening up more wounds on the monster than you'd have without the Sword and Shield there. Speaking of things that are better or worse, now that we've gone over all of the individual attacks and how they combo together, it's time to do a bit of a deeper dive. All of these numbers were collected in the training dummy with 0% affinity, so no crits, no elements, no status, wounds were turned off for consistency, no active skills, and exactly 100 attack with the coefficient turned off in the settings. So this is about as standardized as numbers can get. So let's talk about all of the combo options themselves and what is most worth doing in various scenarios. Time in this table is the amount of time it takes from the first input to a return to your neutral position at the end of a combo. Damage is very self-explanatory, it's the damage done by the combo, and DPS is the damage per second that the combo deals. And then I've got extra notes or variables in its own column as well for anything else worth talking about. As we start, I've got this essentially in the order that we've talked about it from different abilities, but let's talk about what these numbers actually mean in the context of combat and what it means that you should actually do. Your highest damage burst combo is the lateral slash combo. This takes less than 2 seconds to complete and does more damage than the full chop combo does. The full chop combo in comparison is 2.5 seconds when done stationary, but has the advantage of letting you move and reposition with every strike. That's the main difference. So if you are stationary, always aim for the lateral thrust combo. If you are moving, go for the chop combo instead. The shield bash combo is the weakest of the 3 main combos, mostly due to long recovery frames at the end, but still deals blunt damage and stun value, which is its main niche. All 3 of these combos can then be extended by a mix of Spinning Reaper or Charged Chop, or both. Extending with Spinning Reaper only is solid value, and the amount of time this adds to the combo actually depends on the base combo itself. The reasoning for this is because every combo has its own unique amount of recovery frames after the final hit. These recovery frames are cancelled by Spinning Reaper, so the more recovery frames that a combo has, the actually faster Spinning Reaper will come out comparatively. The simple way of saying that is Spinning Reaper adds a lot more relative value to the shield bash combo than it does to the lateral slash combo, because it replaces a lot of recovery frames after the final shield bash. That said, with all these numbers collected, it's always better to add Spinning Reaper to the end of a combo if you have the time to do so without getting hit. Then we have Charged Chop, and the first thing of note about Charged Chop is I only mention it here as a finisher. It is entirely not worth using outside of that. It's just not good unless you get that double damage bonus, but also the fact that in every instance except for one, I count it with Rising Slash tacked onto the end. That's because the natural recovery frames of Charged Chop before you can enter your next combo are longer than if you were to use Rising Slash to connect it into your next action. Quite literally, the combo gets almost a second faster by pressing Rising Slash instead of doing nothing. With that consideration, it is always worth doing Charged Chop after Spinning Reaper if you have the time to expend a combo into this without getting hit, as long as you are following Charged Chop with Rising Slash to cut off the end animation. I've also listed each combo with Charged Chop and Rising Slash, but no Spinning Reaper, and the main thing that you'll notice is that the DPS is higher when you do this, only slightly, but this has some pretty interesting effects. That means in all situations, your best usage of these combos combo finishers depends on how much time you have. For chop combo as an example, if you have 3.5 seconds to hit the monster before you're in danger, you can finish it up with Spinning Reaper and then move on to the next combo. If you have 6.3 seconds instead, a much longer window, then following that Spinning Reaper with Charge Chop and Rising Slash is a damage increase over just starting a fresh combo after Spinning Reaper. If you have slightly less time than that, if you only have 6 seconds exactly, let's say, then you should instead skip the Spinning Reaper entirely and go directly into Charge Chop and Rising Slash. But that is such an unbelievably niche little situation, it cuts out so little time from it, that honestly, you're fine just not thinking about that option much and choosing between ending a combo naturally, extending into Spinning Reaper if you have a little bit extra time, or extending into Spinning Reaper plus Charge Chop and Rising Slash if you have a lot of extra time. Next up, let's talk backstep options. Using backstep into Charge Slash, Scaling Slash, and then doing Falling Bash is pretty solid damage, but it's worse in wilds than the lateral slash combo variations, even for raw, so essentially this is only worth doing on repeat if you're trying to slap on stun damage to the monster's head, or if you use the backstep already as an evasive maneuver and are using this as a follow-up for damage. As for plunging thrust specifically, without element involved, it would take an average of 10 hits from plunging thrust to match the damage of Falling Bash. Smaller monsters will give you far less hits than that, but the largest monsters in the game will give you more than 10 hits pretty consistently. If your target is giving less than 10 hits, plunging thrust is worse than Falling Bash. If you are getting more than 10 hits, or if you're getting 10 hits exactly, plunging thrust is better. The exception to that is element or status focused builds. Falling Bash cannot apply element or status, so you almost always want to focus on plunging thrust from the aerial position while using those kinds of builds. As for Perfect Rush then, here I've got a poorly timed full Perfect Rush combo compared to a well-timed one on the table, with the combo counting until you go up into the air after the Scaling Slash. Across the full combo, timing the inputs correctly is almost double damage. We talked earlier about it being a 2.5 times multiplier, but that's because not every hit in the full combo from the backstep onwards is actually counted as being Perfect Rush itself, so the full combo is only boosted by double, but that's still double damage. Generally speaking, Perfect Rush is your longest combo to use. It is also, however, your strongest combo by far, and your strongest damage per second of anything if you have the time to actually use it. We talked earlier about how you can Perfect Rush combo into Spinning Reaper and then further into Charge Chop, but because Spinning Reaper and Charge Chop are actually less damage per second than the Perfect Rush combo itself, this ends up being a damage loss over just ending the Perfect Rush with an aerial attack, whichever one is best in that moment, and then possibly even starting Perfect Rush over again fresh. For the most part, Perfect Rush is really difficult to use against a monster that is moving actively or attacking or doing anything that isn't flailing in pain while knocked down on the ground. You can sneak in a Perfect Rush combo against an active monster, but it requires good knowledge of their moveset and timings, and for the most part, you will want to only use Perfect Rush against downed monsters. With that said, the general mindset is chop combo if you need to move while still attacking the monster, lateral slash combo if you're standing still, but the monster is still able to move, Perfect Rush if the monster is downed. Use combo extending attacks wherever you can fit them without getting hit, and importantly, guard. Obviously it's not on this list, but Perfect Guard into a counter slash is your highest possible damage per second interaction. It's just not here because it's one attack. It is a single attack, but it is a massively heavily hitting attack, so you want to Perfect Guard as much as possible, and you always want to use counter slash if you hit a Perfect Guard. On which note, the final two entries on this list are pretty memey, but they are worth mentioning. While guarding, you can just press circle on repeat to spam guard slash and do nothing else. This does absolutely pitiful damage, but you are always guarding while doing this, so you are blocking damage from the front, and you are still doing damage. And importantly, because guard slash refreshes the Perfect Guard window, you can do this thing where you press guard slash, then let go of guard and press guard again, which counts as starting the Perfect Guard window, then press guard slash again, which restarts the Perfect Guard window a second time. And on screen, this just looks like you're spamming guard slash, but you can loop this over and over for a super low damage combo that does give you extremely high uptime on Perfect Guard. Then there is a sort of halfway option for this, which is actually comparable damage per second to doing the chop combo without any finishers, so it's not terrible, and that is comboing guard slash into rising slash, which then can combo into guard slash, which can combo into rising slash, and you can literally do this infinitely as much as you want to, though the inputs aren't the most comfortable to spam. This gives you much less garbage damage than pure guard slash spam, but still gives you pretty frequent automatic perfect guard windows in a combo every time you hit the guard slash part of this. So about 50% of the time, you're still actively in your perfect guard window while still actively attacking. Essentially, the entire point of this whole section is, hey, I compiled a load of numbers about all the different parts of the moveset that properly matter, but if you just looked purely at the DPS number without context, you'd sit around trying to spam perfect rush into falling bash over and over. The monster would probably be whacking you out of the combo every single time and interrupt you, and then you might quit the weapon and never pick up sword and shield again. So all this stuff matters, and it's important to talk about it with all the context too. Next up then, let's talk about wake up hits with sword and shield. In group play, you don't want to take the wake up hit away on a sleeping monster from meteor hitting weapons. Sword and shield does not have something that hits that hard in a single hit. But when solo or in a group that is using barrel bombs, if you use guard slash to hit the barrel bombs and make them explode as the wake up hit itself, you will get a perfect guard from the barrel bomb explosion, which you can then counter slash the monster with. Make sure you don't hit the monster itself with the guard slash, as you want the bombs to get the damage boost, not the guard slash, but this is a nice, safe, consistent way to both trigger the bombs for a bonus damage and get your own bonus damage from standing there, while being immediately able to continue the fight too, because you aren't getting knocked back by triggering the bombs. Past this, we have some more special mechanics or interactions as well. Specifically, as a guarding weapon, sword and shield can power clash with monsters. When you guard a monster's attack, this will build up a sort of hidden gauge, and when the gauge fills, you will get a power clash. When this happens, you'll know the animation very quickly. It's very direct. You will want to spam the triangle button to stab the monster, and then you will win. If you succeed at the power clash, it counts as a combo finisher for the sake of your other attacks to follow after, so you can do something like charge chop too, which is pretty cool as well. While riding your seikret, your dismount attack launches you forward with a sword slash, but if you hit a monster with the early part of this animation and then press triangle, you can send yourself up into the air and then do any of your standard aerial attacks from that position, which makes the dismount attack from the seikret much more actually usable for the weapon than you might think. Then finally, of course, there's the sneak attack for sword and shield. Every weapon has one, but here is the animation for sword and shields, if you were wondering specifically. That's everything then as far as the actual moveset and how to use the weapon, so let's take a few minutes to discuss what you are looking for when evaluating a sword and shield, the best types of damage to focus on for the weapon, the amount of sharpness that you want, and then any skills that I want to specifically call out for sword and shield as well. For the weapons themselves then, generally speaking, sword and shield is always good with element. It always has been, and it probably will be again in the future once some stuff is fixed or some different monsters are added, but with the current roster of monsters and wilds, all of the actually difficult fights, the important fights, are not very weak to elements. The result of this is that a lot of the time, right now, you will do more damage with a build that has an element or a status on the weapon, but focuses the actual damage on the raw attack above all else, rather than an element or status focused build properly. That said, a dragon element sword and shield will do wonders for most of the hardest monsters in the game. You can pretty much just make that one and then you won't have to consider changing for most of the important fights. And to make this, I would recommend using artian parts, 3 attack parts, and then for the reinforcements, your goals are 1 bit of sharpness boost and then as many attack increases as possible. It is fully possible to get 100% affinity from your equipment, which makes raw attack more valuable than affinity on the weapon itself, as you can't overcap on attack, but you can on affinity. That said, blast status is another solid option that is pretty equally good against the top tier of monsters in the game, and paralysis is extremely strong in Monster Hunter Wilds so far, and a good paralysis sword and shield can get multiple paralysis in hunts, which is an entirely viable way to build as well if you want to create more downtime on the monsters rather than just having higher numbers in general. As for skills then, for sharpness you are generally looking for around 40 hits of white sharpness for relatively comfortable gameplay. You can get this with the sharpness increasing weapon skills if necessary, or with help from things like Razor Sharp or Master's Touch. Aside from that, some important notes for weapon skills. Guard is a weapon skill in Wilds. This is useful for sword and shield, and honestly I wouldn't hesitate to say that it is good, especially early, but when you perfect guard an attack, it acts as if you had guard level 3 anyways. So essentially ranks of guard are only for imperfect guards. The better you get at the weapon, the less good the guard skill actually is. In contrast, you always want to get 1 rank of guard up as a skill. This lets you guard attacks that normally are unguardable, and increased ranks of this makes them do less damage, but that doesn't matter. We just want to have the actual ability to guard them in the first place, which all you need is rank 1 to get. This does does make the difference even with perfect guard, so no matter how good you are with a weapon, one rank of guard up is really good. Other than that, offensive guard is incredible for sword and shield. This skill increases your damage after a well-timed guard, meaning when you start guarding relatively close to when the attack connects. If you get a perfect guard, you will always activate offensive guard, but the window is also slightly longer than perfect guard too, and this gives you a pretty meaty percent attack bonus, which is important. It's percent per rank, which is really solid. If you use this skill, you want to be a bit more active about trying to purposefully guard attacks to trigger it than you might otherwise be, but it is a really solid offensive skill in the game for this weapon. Next up in priority is critical boost. All of your affinity will either come as a base stat on the weapon or from your armor skills and talisman, and because you can hit 100% affinity with that, critical boost value as a weapon skill absolutely skyrockets. If you can't work in critical boost, the next options down would be attack boost and critical eye, though they are worth a fair amount less than the other options we've already talked about, really. Aside from that, also worth noting that Slugger gives you bonus stun damage, and while this doesn't necessarily make much of a difference for the weapons that are only blunt damage and only stun value, it's actually not bad for sword and shield, and this lets you get more stuns in a hunt than you might otherwise, especially when you're in a more raw attack focused setup anyways, and actually using your falling bash a bit more often. The first rank of Slugger is better than the rest of the ranks of this skill, and so it's not bad at all to just get it as the second rank of a multi-skill decoration. Just run one level of Slugger, and that's the best spot for it in the current equipment. As for armor skills, sword and shield sadly doesn't make as good use of adrenaline rush as you might think, and as I had hoped, as sliding swipe does not trigger the bonus on adrenaline rush for whatever reason. I suppose it's fair given that it just has an excessive amount of iframes on sliding swipe, so if it did work it would be so easy to trigger, but it's sort of sad because that would have been a cool overlap that sword and shield would have. Burst, then, as a skill, is great for sword and shield for pretty much just always, as this will give you bonus attack and element damage after your first hit on a monster, and then even more bonus after 5 consecutive hits. The buff will stay active until you go a few seconds without hitting the monster, and sword and shield can easily keep this buff active for the duration of an entire hunt, and it is pretty much always active before your strongest attacks too, which is when it matters the most. Another big note is the maximum might skill. This gives affinity as long as you stay on full stamina. Sword and shield has no attacks that use stamina, so we can manage this pretty dang well. Not only that, but we have 2 different ways of dodging attacks with iframes that do not cost stamina, so you don't even really have to roll, which is the most common way of using stamina in the game. And the only part of the active moveset that uses stamina is when you guard and attack, so maximum might is also extremely effective for sword and shield. Outside of that, the only specific thing I would consider is maybe slotting in some wide range when group hunting, as you can use items without sheathing, and you can easily save a hunt and save some hunters' lives by doing exactly that. Other than that, you've got the same sort of general best skills as all of the other weapons do pretty much. Focus on affinity and attack, or go for some flair if you prefer creating more wounds. Element is a viable option, and may come into play a little bit more after some title update monsters arrive, but again, as of right now, we are definitely getting more damage out of focusing on raw attack and affinity, and just having the element sort of be on the side, rather than a full element focus. That just about does it for today then, everyone. This has been an extremely long video, so if you're still with me, congratulations for making it this far. You now know pretty much everything that I know about the sword and shield in Monster Hunter Wilds, and the main hope that I have for this is that it will get people to try the weapon that maybe haven't before. Or hey, if you have tried it before and gave up on it, maybe you just needed some specific pushing in a new direction. Maybe you wanted to see what changed in Wilds. Maybe you just needed some understanding of what combos are the best and how to use them together. I don't know, but hopefully this makes your continued time playing Wilds better regardless. If any of you Sword and Shield mains out there have any additions or tips that I didn't mention in this, of course feel free to leave them down in the comments below for your fellow hunters. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.